Welcome back, friends, and we're excited to be talking about an 8-2 Wolverine football team. But before we get to our 7 from 77, I want to make sure that you are aware fully of what's going on MGoBlue Podcasts. Already out the radio replay of Inside Michigan Football. We all know that happens live on Monday night. Head coach Sharon Moore, defensive coordinator Wink Martindale, as well as edge defender Cam Brandt joined me on Monday night. And as a little teaser for next week, we had J.B. Brown, the special teams coordinator last week. This week, Wink Martindale. So that leaves one coordinator left. Chip Lindsey will join us on next week's edition of Inside Michigan Football. Still to come this week, Defend the Block. Wednesday, Middle Tennessee State is Michigan basketball's opponent. And so there will be a post-game edition there. Conquering Heroes. We've got our final Hall of Honor episode. Brian Deemer, as well as Jack Harvey, will be my guest. That'll come out on Thursday. Keys to the Game will come out on Thursday for the Maryland game on In the Trenches, as well as the recap after the 4 o'clock kick, 4:01 to be exact. 5-minute slide for all you TV and radio nerds. So as soon as that game ends, we'll repackage everything that we do in the post game, and I'll have some more comments with Brian Bush, Jason Avant, Jack Miller, Doug Karst. The entire team will be there for that post game edition. At this time, you saw him a little bit earlier. Voice of Michigan basketball, Brian Bush.
The 5-minute slide for those who are really entrenched in all of this. TV networks 60 minutes before every game pretty much have the ability to slide the kick 5 minutes. That's why sometimes you might see on your, not ticket stub anymore, I can't say that, but on your digital ticket, you might see 7 o'clock, 7:30, John's favorite, noon, 10 a.m., whatever it might be. Not always exactly then. The Ohio State kick will not kick at 12 o'clock on the button. I promise you that. So, but yeah, Maryland, 4:01, maybe 4:06, but a big game. And you mentioned an 8-2 football team. Somehow, some way.
Somehow, some way. By hook or crook, we find a way to get a win in Wrigley Field. That's all that matters. And it was a tough outing. But as long as you score one more than they do, it doesn't matter if you turn the ball over 5 more times than they do. The only stat that matters is the one in the score sheet.
100%. Well, let's get into our 7 from 77, starting with those turnovers. Michigan in the first 5 games of the season only had 3 total turnovers. But in the 5 games since then, by game, 2, 0, 1, 2, and then the big 5 against Northwestern at Wrigley Field. It's not surprising that Michigan's best performance over the last 5 games is the 0. That was the home win over Washington. So any common themes, any aspects that you feel like this team can immediately correct, other than, just don't turn the ball over, that you saw in those 3 fumbles and 2 interceptions on Saturday?
So if you're looking at those 3 fumbles, and I look at the 2 that are a little bit different than one, and that is the fumble by Samaj and the fumble by Andrew Marsh. Both of those were guys that are just simply trying to make plays. And we know Samaj is trying to make something happen in special teams. At some point, you got to realize that, hey, I'm not going anywhere. Instead of fighting for those extra 6 inches, I need to make sure that I possess the ball all the way to the whistle. And it was just kind of the same thing with Andrew Marsh, where he's just trying to fight for a little bit more. The one that was a little bit different is the exchange between Bryce Underwood and Bryson Cusdahl. Those are a matter of execution. So 2 are not like the other, but the point of it is there needs to be a heightened awareness every single time that you are in possession of the football, especially when it's at the end of the game. You need a field goal to win. You need points to put it away. Whatever the situation, they're so vital. So you've got to make sure that possession is the most important thing at that point. And then when you start talking about the interceptions, I think the second interception was one of, for Bryce, it was just a rhythm throw. And we had seen him throw that ball a couple of times, that same pass where he's faking it to the running back. He rides the running back, down towards the line of scrimmage, and he comes up and he was able to hit whether it was Marsh or McCulley on a slant route. And I think this one, he was assuming that everything was going to be the same because pre-snap looks the same. But you got to understand those linebackers, especially those ones from Northwestern, They're smart. They're going to adjust. Linebacker just drifted back, said, I've seen this before, and he was in position to make that interception. So it's for him, it's, hey, even if this play has been successful, you've got to know that things are going to change on the defensive side of things. They're going to make adjustments. You always got to, you need to be able to feel it, but you've got to see it with your eyes first.
We'll talk about some of the good that Michigan did, but one more just broad, number 2 on our 7 from 77. Other aspects you're concerned about from Saturday?
Well, one defensively, and we talked about this during the game, it was extending drives by jumping off sides on third down. And whether it's the snap count, if it's verbal or if it's the clapping, like you should not, it's nearly impossible to block everything out, but your focus is on the ball. Once the ball moves, you're off and running. And these guys do a great job of getting off the ball, but you can't anticipate that snap count because, especially for a team like Northwestern. Now, you might not see it as much with Maryland because of the young quarterback, but when you've got a veteran quarterback, you've got to know that they're going to use the snap count to their advantage, and you got to see that ball move. But a lot of great things on defense, and we'll talk about that more as we go through 7 from 77. Offensively, I think the biggest area of concern, and it's kind of been hanging around all season long, is the protection of Bryce Underwood. That needs to be solidified. And, hey, this is a very physical, athletic front against Maryland. We know what we're going to get against Ohio State. The athletes are going to go from this level to this level. But you've got to be able to develop a little bit of confidence in your protections. And it's not just pass sets. It's not the physical side of it. It's also being able to be confident in knowing that, hey, this is actually where I'm setting, and not looking at a linebacker, looking at a 3 technique. It's not anticipating any of those things. It's knowing exactly what you're going to do at the snap of the ball so that you're in position to protect the quarterback.
We'll continue on our 7 from 77, talk about some of the good we saw on Saturday. But first, John, a word from Big Boy.
Yeah, and hey, tell you what, for a meal as timeless as football, you got to start at Big Boy. Sink into the Big Boy burger. Now listen to this one, Brian. You got 2 layers of seasoned beef, American cheese, crisp lettuce, and their famous sauce in every single bite. And here's what I'm really excited about, because if you're craving more, you got the Bob's Bacon Cheeseburger, and it adds smoky, yummy bacon and melty cheese in every bite. Ah! I tell you what, we had cookies another time. I'll take one of those bacon cheeseburgers right now. Finish it off with a hand-dipped shake, vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry. My favorite would be the chocolate shake with some whipped cream at top, and you got to put that cherry on there. For game day comfort that always delivers, head over to Big Boy, and you can find more information at bigboy.com.
I'm glad we got the tough stuff from Saturday out of the way so you could deliver that flawless, salivating read, and then talk about a guy who had a near flawless performance on Saturday. That was Andrew Marsh, Michigan true freshman wide receiver. A record-setting day for Michigan. Incredible performance. We talked about it plenty on Saturday. My question to you, John, is looking ahead now. What more can Marsh add to his game, and how can that elevate the rest of the offense with what he can do, and now the attention that unquestionably will start coming his way in waves?
Right, and so he's obviously going to be the number 1 target. He's proven that throughout the course of this season. He's grown into that role, and Jason Avant said this, hey, when you get, some guys just have that playmaking ability. We saw it on a 3rd down conversion, toe tapping on the sidelines. Like, everybody knew where that ball was going. Bryce knew where that ball was going. Marsh knew where that ball was going. Northwestern's defense knew where that ball was going. And so the next level is when a defense knows that you're the number 1 target. To be successful as an offense, as in a passing game, they're going to try and get Andrew Marsh the ball. They're going to do a lot of different things in terms of coverage. They're going to change it up, man, zone, bracket coverage. They're going to do a lot of different things, and it's going to come down to recognizing those. And it's going to be a challenge for him as a young player. Reading defenses is not the first thing that comes to you when you make that transition from high school to college. But because he's earned that attention, he's going to have to deal with that. It's also going to be running precise routes. How do you get open? How do you create separation when, hey, you're the focal point of that defense? You've got to be precise in the routes that you're running. And on the flip side, those windows for Bryce Underwood to throw into are going to become smaller. And he's been accurate. We talked about the couple of interceptions. Those weren't accuracy issues. Those were decision issues. When he is on his game and when the throw is right, he's been very accurate. So That's where Andrew Marsh can take his game to the next level, knowing that he's going to attract a lot of attention.
I mean, it's exciting, right? There have been a lot of really special players and talents who have come through, and Michigan's had some solid receivers during this run, this new era of Michigan football, but nobody like what Andrew Marsh has done this year.
No, and the excitement of looking to the future and the youth that's on this team. You've got Bryce Underwood, a freshman, connecting with the freshman receiver. You've got 3 second-year offensive linemen. You've got Jordan Marshall in the backfield, who's a second-year guy. You know what you have coming in a recruiting class. Tight ends, full of talent and young talent as well. So it's an exciting time, and it's exciting to know that Bryce and Andrew Marsh are going to continue to grow together throughout the course of this offseason in their careers here at Michigan.
Definitely encourage folks to check out the radio replay of Inside Michigan Football, the radio show John had Monday night with head coach Sharon Moore. Some really cool stories about the post-game film session with Sharon talking to Bryce about that big throw very late, the toe tapper, which was an amazing catch, just as good of a throw by Bryce. Definitely check that out. Now, number 4 on our 7 from 77, let's talk defense. Northwestern matched a Big Ten season high for them offensively with 22 points, but it does feel like there's a bit of an asterisk because of the fact that Northwestern took advantage at times of some very good field position. Felt like another really strong effort from the defense. Your thoughts on what you saw in your film review, especially considering, Michigan got Jayshon Barham and Jimmy Rolder back, but still no Rod Moore and still no Cole Sullivan.
Yeah, and I think in terms of getting those players back, I think there's anticipation that Cole Sullivan will be back at some point. Rod Moore, I don't really know if we're going to see him again or not this year. I don't know what's going on there. But in regards to the defensive performance, because of a punt that puts Northwestern at the 50-yard line, or a turnover that puts them at midfield, or another turnover that puts them, or a turnover on downs that puts them, on the 39-yard line, they had really good field position, and to only give up 9 points in those situations, forcing field goals, that's a huge win, especially when Michigan is able to, early in the game, score touchdowns. You're scoring 7, they're scoring 3s. Score at one point was 21-9, and I mean it's because of the defensive effort that they had. And then you think about what happened at the end of the game when you are down 22-21 and you need the ball back, and they had to get the ball back twice, 3 and outs both times, and the last 3 and out they actually forced Northwestern to lose 8 yards on that drive. So they did everything that they had to do. It wasn't great position to be in. Backs were against the wall at times. You forced field goals. And one of the other touchdowns that they gave up was on the interception return. They took it down to the 6-yard line. That was a one-play drive. Northwestern turns it into 6 points. I'm not really going to hold the defense. Their backs to the fire on that one. So I thought it was a spectacular performance defensively. I mentioned the offsides penalties, extending drives early. That you never want to have those pre-snap penalties are going to kill you, especially when you extend drives. You've done the hard work early in the season. It was, not being able to get off the field on third downs because they were, USC game. You got a 3rd and forever, and you allowed them to convert a first down physically. This one, you're gifting it to them. So there's some areas that they can still improve upon, but it was a hell of a defensive performance.
So number 5 on our 7 from 77, a common topic around here in recent seasons, understandably so. 2 years ago, the national championship season, this game before the game was at Maryland. And, Michigan, they almost, I don't know if it was ever truly felt like it was in doubt, but it definitely was a little dicier than you expected. Michigan only won that game by 7. As much as it was frustrating on Saturday, and certainly there was some frustration against Purdue back on November the 1st, Michigan's previous game, does how these last couple of games and how they've transpired help eliminate any and all potential look ahead to the game? Because Michigan has to win this game for that one to matter as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan, they're very aware that they haven't played their best game yet. They're going to have to play their best game if they have a chance to be in the game against Ohio State. They know that. But to get there, you struggled against Purdue. You came out with a win. You struggled and were trailing until about 2 seconds left in the game against Northwestern, yet you're able to eke out a win. And I've asked the guys all this, whether it's the players or it's Sharon and the coaches, like, how do you stay focused knowing that is on the horizon, the game against Ohio State. And they've all said, hey, we are in playoff mode. We know that we have to win because yes, we want to beat our rival. We want to have all of those things at the end of the season. But the ultimate goal is getting to college football playoffs and winning a national championship. That becomes an impossibility if they don't take care of business against Maryland. There's still some hope if the chips fall right that they might get a chance to go play in the Big Ten championship game. They don't control their own destiny in that. But what they do control is a chance to get to the college football playoffs. They know it. And these couple of games that they've just had have raised that awareness of we've got enough of our own issues to have to go fix before we start thinking about what's coming next week.
We will talk about the Big Ten top 25 storylines here momentarily, but if you're tired of your natural gas bill rate continuing to climb, we've got a sponsor for you.
That's right, Brian, and you can stop the roller coaster ride with My Choice Energy. You can lock in your natural gas rate and say goodbye to surprise price hikes. It's like an insurance policy for your energy bill. My Choice Energy is part of Foster Energy Services, based in Richmond, and they've been there since 2002. Their locally owned business, family business, has been helping residential and commercial customers just like you and me take control of their energy costs. You can still get one bill from your utility company, but now with a fixed gas supply rate from My Choice Energy. Lock in your rate today, and all you have to do to make that happen is visit fostermychoice.com. That's fostermychoice.com.
All right, we've got some Big Ten top 25 talk. Stay tuned. If you are on the video side, about 15 minutes from now, Michael Cohen, national reporter for Fox Sports, will stop by and share his thoughts on the CFP race, some of the coaching carousel stuff. And also, if you're on the audio side, be sure to check it out. Michigan Athletics YouTube at John Jansen 77 on Twitter. Let's talk about the Big Ten to start. The three at the top of the standings, they keep rolling. Oregon throttles Minnesota 42-13. Ohio State, no issues with UCLA, who was without their starting quarterback 48-10. And Indiana, a little bit of a slog to start, but they roll at the end 31-10 over Wisconsin. Any takeaways from those three lopsided games?
Not particularly. I mean, Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, they're just simply all taking care of business.
Yeah.
The big game this weekend, USC.
I know.
USC somehow comes back from, what were they down, 17 at one point to Iowa?
Yeah, it was, I don't know what it was, 26-21, but they looked dead to rights.
They did. And obviously they come back to win in the rain in Southern California. And they're going to go north to take on Oregon. And this is a game not just for who's going to be fourth in the CFP in terms of the Big Ten teams that are going to possibly get into the college football playoffs. It could be a battle for who's third.
Yep.
And Oregon is in a real dogfight right now because they lost to Indiana at home. If they lose to if they lose to USC at home, obviously they're at risk in terms of their playoff exposure, but USC is fighting for their playoff lives.
Yeah, you look at their schedule, and obviously one of the marquee matchups was a top 10 clash at Penn State, but that has aged about as poorly as humanly possible.
Yeah.
I mean, so they really don't have a whole lot of big-time wins. Their non-conference, Power 4 game was Oklahoma State. The Cowboys are awful. So you kind of get to a point where you do wonder a little bit about the resume for Oregon. And it's the same thing we'll talk about with the SEC. Same thing with Michigan, even if they can win out and get to 10-2. Same thing with USC, because then Oregon gets knocked down a peg. I really thought for a while 10-2 was definitely going to get it done, no matter where you were in the Big Ten or the SEC. We're at a point now where that might not be the case.
It might not. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Big Ten, what happens in the SEC. Also, what's going to happen, around the country in the Big 12, the ACC. There's a lot of great battles that are going to be happening. But just in terms of the Big Ten, it's a tight battle. And the highlight of this coming week is USC Oregon, and it's really the only one I think where there's a giant battle for determining who's going to have a seat at the table when it comes time for playoff.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Outside of the top five, right? You got the three teams that right now are in the playoff if things ended, plus Michigan and USC, which I still think If Michigan wins out, they'll make the playoff. If USC wins out, they'll make the playoff. I can't guarantee it, but I think it's pretty likely. Any other team, storyline, player you're intrigued by down the stretch in the regular season in the Big Ten?
In the Big Ten, it's interesting because obviously it's going to be Michigan, Ohio State. That'll be the big story next week. Iowa, with that loss, they got 3 losses in the Big Ten. Nebraska, 3 losses in the Big Ten. USC, once they finish this trip to Oregon, obviously they got the rivalry game with UCLA, and we've seen UCLA play good at times. But I don't necessarily know that there's a quote-unquote battle the rest of the season in the Big Ten for who's going to be in, who's going to be out.
Yep, we'll learn a lot. USC, Oregon this week, and then Michigan, Ohio State next week. All right, our number 7 here on this 7 from 77, talking about the other storylines. Well, at halftime, it looked like Texas A&M was going to get throttled at home. They come back, the biggest comeback of the season, a meme creation for Shane Beamer, the head coach of South Carolina. Don't go showboating into the halftime locker room. You can do it post-game. But your thoughts on a Texas A&M team that, I mean, they looked terrible, and then they looked like they were the number 3 or better team in the nation.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to have moments like that, right? And I go back to our Iowa game in '97 where, hey, it's going to take sometimes the ball bouncing the right way or a special effort to make sure you don't lose that game you're not supposed to lose. And whether it was Ole Miss and Florida, Texas A&M and the battle that they were in, there were a lot of great moments last weekend, and the teams that were fighting for their playoff lives were able to come out on top.
The other big story was Oklahoma, and we've said a few times on here, hey, hopefully the Sooners can keep winning. Kind of wanted to be 9-3, keep winning, but they go to Tuscaloosa and win. They finish with home games against Missouri and LSU. Not easy outs by any stretch, but Oklahoma will be favored. And now I feel like if they're 10-2, Brent Venables and company are going to the playoff.
Yeah, I really do think that they are. And I mean, you look at the rest of their schedule, it's one that they should win out.
Yep.
And if they do as a 2-loss team, it's kind of the watermark. We talked about it, maybe a 3-loss team, maybe it's going to only be 1 loss. I think a 2-loss Oklahoma is going to be in the college football playoffs.
Otherwise, Georgia cruises past now 3-loss Texas. The Longhorns have Arkansas and Texas A&M at home. If they're able to beat A&M, and that's the Aggies' only loss, maybe there's some conversation about a 9-3 Texas team. I kind of hope not, right? Like 9-3, I feel like there are enough good teams in college football. At least I should say this. I think there are enough good resumes in college football where we don't need a 9-3 team in the playoffs.
Right. And it's really we'll talk about it, in the next couple of weeks. But when you're thinking about this SEC matchups, Ole Miss right now 10-1, and there's this underlying drama about Lane Kiffin. And is he going to take the Florida job? Does he take it at the end of the season? They don't want to wait until mid-January to hire their coach, yet they're in line for a playoff spot. They're on a bye week this week. Next week, it's the Egg Bowl.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, weird things can happen in that one, but they're in line to be in the SEC championship game. Georgia, fighting for their playoff lives. They're 9-1. Georgia Tech at the end of the season, they're also fighting for their playoff lives. Now, it's not a conference game, but it's going to be interesting. Texas A&M. Texas is a 2-loss SEC team, 3-loss. Their playoff hopes are probably done. But then you look at Alabama, Auburn. You know what? There
have been some weird Auburn wins or close calls in that series recently.
And we were talking about LSU. We were talking about Oklahoma. Their final game is against LSU. Okay, it's an LSU team that still has a lot of talent.
Totally.
At the beginning of the season, we were talking about as a college football playoff contender, possible national champion contender, but their season hasn't gone the way that they wanted it to. What better way than to spoil Oklahoma's season? And that's there's a couple of games. It's very much the same as Florida and who was I just talking about this year? Florida and Ole Miss, right? Hey, you take it down to the wire. It's Texas A&M finding a way to eke out a win against a team that they should have been blowing out. That's one of those games in the final week of the season where you're like, can LSU jump up and bite Oklahoma?
And don't forget about 8-2 Vanderbilt. They host Kentucky, then they go to Tennessee, Volunteers they're 3-loss. They're, from all accounts, out of the playoff conversation. I mean, if Vanderbilt's 10-2, they've got a pretty darn good resume. So it'll be very interesting, to say the least. ACC, Georgia Tech survives. They almost lost to a Boston College team that has one win, 36-34. Yellow Jackets are 9-1, and Jon mentioned their big matchup coming up against Georgia. But they've got a huge ACC clash against a Pitt team that, from all accounts, was kind of taking the knee against Notre Dame. Pat Narduzzi didn't even talk like it was a big urgent game. He wanted to win the next two because Pitt's in that ACC championship conversation. Panthers got blasted 37-15. Georgia Tech and Pitt each have one loss in ACC play. Same with Virginia and SMU. So there are still 4 teams in the ACC standings ahead of Miami, which is probably the team that I think, if most people said, hey, who's the best team in the ACC? I think more people would say Miami than any other team.
Yep.
Chaos can ensue. Georgia Tech or Pitt will have one loss. How do you make up this? The reality is, if Georgia Tech would have lost that game, then they're probably not going to the playoff without winning the ACC.
Right.
The question is, how many teams – is Miami the only team that has a chance to get in without winning the ACC other than Georgia Tech?
Probably.
Yeah.
But I just, because of the 2 losses that they took, I don't know. We asked the over-under on Big 12 and ACC teams.
Yeah.
Do we think there's going to be a total of 3? And I think there will. But
you're less confident about that over now than last week.
I was. Yep. And part of it has to do with, I thought maybe it was the Big 12 that was going to get a couple of teams in. And when you look at the Big 12, BYU, I think they've got Cincinnati this week, and they've got UCF next week. Now, Cincinnati is a team that's knocked off a couple of highly ranked teams. They're ranked at 25. So that's their last big challenge. But if you look at Texas Tech and you say, okay, well, right now they're ranked sixth in the country. If they go to that championship game and don't follow through and lose to BYU, then who do you take? Because you get the bid from winning the Big 12, and it would ultimately be BYU, but BYU got smoked by Texas Tech earlier. So it's a rematch, and what does the committee do with the rematch if the results are different than the first time they met?
So the reality is, in the Big 12, we'll know a lot this weekend because, as Jon mentioned, BYU is at Cincinnati. If BYU wins that game, the race is almost certainly over. If BYU loses, there are a bunch of 5-2 teams: Houston, Utah, Arizona State, Cincinnati being one of those teams that would get a big win. I value my time too much to know Big 12 tiebreakers, so I have not dug into that, nor will I between now and next week, I'm guessing. However, I do think it would open up a fascinating case. Because remember, our very own Ward Manuel said, as the committee chair, between the regular season's final weekend and championship week, he basically said no team that's currently out of the picture can jump back in. He said out there, we are not going to penalize a team that loses in championship week with an extra data point that others behind them would not. I think that was the correct decision for how last year went.
Right.
I don't think the committee can or should say that for this time, because what if BYU and Texas Tech play again? And what if Texas Tech beats them handily again? They would only have one team that they've lost to twice. I don't know. That game needs to be close if they do play. It needs to
be close, but the way that it played out in the first one. Now, hey, there could be different results between these two teams. I just don't know if there's enough for BYU, their young quarterback, the way that they played that game, to make up the difference against the talent that Texas Tech has.
100%. All right. It'll be fascinating. There's no doubt. Also a fascinating conversation on the audio side as we get into our transitions that Jon had with kicker Dominic Zvada. On the video side, we'll be joined by Michael Cohen of Fox Sports here momentarily, but wanted to catch up with a few of the comments. I was wondering where this username went on YouTube, MGoBlue Brian 19. That's what I wanted, but this fine Brian has it. Michigan seems to play down to their opponent. Do you think against the Buckeyes they can play up to their level?
Well, that's certainly the hope. And to do that, they're going to have to be able to protect Bryce. They can't turn the ball over. You can't lose the turnover battle against the Buckeyes, and certainly not by 5, but even by 1. They're playing too good a defense. it's really going to have to come. We need to see another really good defensive performance against Maryland this week. Because if you go back to last year, it was that defensive performance paired with 50 points scored, but it was the defensive performance against Northwestern last year that really sent them into that Ohio State game with some good vibes and some good mojo.
Question from Patrick: if Jordan Marshall is able to play this weekend, do you play him, or do you trust your O-line with Bryson Cusdahl, Jasper Parker, and others? It's a fascinating question. Sharon Moore seems certainly more optimistic and more willing to showcase his optimism than I would have anticipated on the radio show. You can catch that replay on our podcast feed. I think with how Michigan has played, if a guy's able to play, you can't hold stuff back.
No, because this is playoff mode. And you would hate to hold back a running back that could be a difference maker. And Bryson Cusdahl did a great job going in there, and I think he can be a difference maker against Maryland. Same thing with Jasper Parker. Jasper Parker has less of a resume for us to really say that. I can say it because I've seen him at practice, but there's a big difference between doing it at Schembechler Hall versus doing it out at College Park when it matters most. If Jordan Marshall can go, I 100% believe that he will be a part of this game plan. Maybe not to the extent of 20 to 25 carries. I think it'll be more 12 to 14 carries and sharing the load with a Bryson Cusdahl and Jasper Parker. But if he can go, I think he certainly goes.
It's a great point. The last 4 games for Michigan, which have been 3 of the 4 were times that Justice Haynes was out. 25 carries against Washington, 15 carries against Michigan State. That was Haynes' last appearance for Michigan. 25 against Purdue, and then 19 leaving early against Northwestern. That being said, your impressions of what you've seen from Cusdahl, former walk-on, who he was a guy, in listening to Jordan Marshall talk in interviews, I remember after Nebraska, he mentioned Bryson first when talking about the other guys who can step up. I think there's a lot of belief, at least in the running back room, in Bryson.
Yeah, there is. And there's a lot of belief in the building in terms of what Cusdahl can do. And here's the other thing is when you hear Sharon, which he told me this on Monday night, in that room, Bryson may be the fastest guy in that room. And you're starting to talk about some elite speed that we've seen out of that room. So he does have the ability to break it. He does. And I trust him. The fumble that happened, it was an exchange issue. It wasn't it wasn't a possession issue for Bryce and Cusdahl. So they'll work that out between him and Bryce. But when he was carrying the football, he was picking up 6-7 yards a pop, and Northwestern was doing everything they possibly could to knock that ball out. He was taking some big time hits. So I would trust him with the football just like I would Jordan Marshall or Justice Haynes.
LW saying James Franklin is back. Congratulations, John.
Yes.
The other guy who's back, who we will start our conversation with Michael Cohen of Fox Sports, is his impressions of James Franklin to Virginia Tech. I know John has been waiting with bated breath to hear about the analysis of James. Look at Michael looking comfortable on your couch
throw
there.
The arm back. Yeah, you got yourself a beer there.
We were having some major lighting issues with the sun in my office, so I had to pull a quick audible at the last minute here so that it wasn't just bright light beaming into my face.
That's an issue Jim Costa has on your morning show, doesn't he?
Yeah. Which I enjoy the fact that I don't, he doesn't have to look at me and I don't have to see him as he shades his eyes. But Mike, I really appreciate you joining us, and I'm curious your thoughts on the committee's evaluation to this point. And I got to ask, I think Indiana is the best team in the country. Where do you rank them, Indiana and Ohio State, right now?
All right, so I'll start with the second one. I would right now have Indiana at number 2 just because I'm a little concerned about some injury problems in their wide receiver core and what that would mean against a group of defensive backs at Ohio State where the height, weight, speed advantages are probably going to tilt toward the Buckeyes. I think Elijah Surratt is so good when he's healthy, but he's missed a couple games in a row now with that hamstring problem. They keep telling me it's minor. But when you're a skill guy and you have a hamstring problem, that can be a little bit concerning because one little tweak the wrong way and that'll set you back a couple weeks given the acceleration and sort of push off that they have at those positions. But I don't think there's any question that if you look at just the starting 11 on both sides of the ball, in that situation, I would put them 1A and 1B with the Buckeyes. I think they're that good. It's just when you have to start to mix in some reserves, if guys drop out, that's where I would kind of just lean toward the depth of talent a little bit at Ohio State. As for the committee overall, I think it's been a little bit of a frustrating season for the Big Ten. I think people thought Illinois would obviously be a little closer toward the playoff picture. Of course, Penn State was supposed to be in the playoff picture. I think with Michigan and USC both already having 2 losses overall, although just 1 in conference, it puts them in a position where a second conference loss pretty much knocks you out because you're not going to get in as a 3-loss team. So I say all that as a preamble to where I think we might end up with 4 or 5 SEC teams in this year's playoff. And I know that upsets some folks, but I think the second tier of the Big Ten has not quite lived up to the expectations that people thought going into the season.
So that being said, if we're talking about potential 10-2 teams from the Big Ten and the SEC, of this group, Michigan, which would require a win over Ohio State, USC, which would require a win over Oregon, which would mean a loss to USC or Washington, but in this case, we'll say USC, or the likes of an Oklahoma, of Vanderbilt, some of the others in the SEC who are in that 2-loss spot. Now Alabama's in that situation. Who are you most confident would get in at 10-2, and who are you least confident in those 2 leagues?
Yeah, so I think at the top I would go Oklahoma and Michigan. I think a 2-loss Oklahoma I think is definitely in, and then a 2-loss Michigan that has a win over Ohio State, which would be probably the single best win in the country to that point in the season, I would think, given that Ohio State is going to be ranked number 1 unless they have some sort of monumental slip up against Rutgers. I think that those 2 teams are automatically in. Where it starts to get a little trickier for me is Oregon, because if Oregon loses to USC and then you start playing the game of who did Oregon beat, who did they lose to, they don't have a lot of quality wins on that schedule. Now, some of that is not necessarily their fault. I don't think when they scheduled Oklahoma State, they expected Oklahoma State to be a complete dumpster fire of a Big 12 school, but that hasn't gone in their favor. And then with USC, I think if USC beats Oregon, they're probably in a pretty good spot to get in. But the question then becomes, if there's a head-to-head situation between USC and Notre Dame, what do you do there? Because, if you're not rewarding head-to-head, what are you rewarding? And then if there's a 10-2 Miami in there, then it's like, well, Miami beat Notre Dame and Notre Dame beat USC. So where does that leave? It becomes really murky. So at the top, I would certainly have Oklahoma and Michigan, followed by, I guess, Oregon. And then USC, it starts to get a little tricky if they don't have some other things go their way.
So let's talk, since we got you this week, Michigan and Ohio State. I know last year we're still trying to figure out how that happened. And do you think lightning or a miracle or however you want to classify it, can it happen 2 years in a row?
Well, John, wouldn't this be 5 years in a row?
Yes, it would. But if we're talking about a completely different,
I know. I'm just busting your chops. Yeah, I mean, look, I think in this game this year, the longer it stays close, the more pressure will mount up on Ohio State in ways that will make that program quite uncomfortable. I think that if it gets to the end of the first quarter and it's tied, if it gets close to halftime and it's tied, you're going to start to see some frustration. You're going to start to see some, what is going on with the Buckeyes, considering like just how easily they've disposed of everyone they've played this year. And I think there is a mental component to it, not just for the players, but I think there's a mental component to it for Ryan Day. Now, that doesn't mean they can't get over that hurdle. Certainly, there were a lot of people that wondered when Ryan Day was going to get over the national championship hump. And then they went through the playoffs and absolutely blasted everybody except Texas. And so it's like, okay, they can do it. I think it being in Ann Arbor is huge. I think if Bryce had to go on the road, not that he can't win on the road, but I just think for a freshman quarterback with everything that game means, to be in Ann Arbor, to be at home, I think will be a huge advantage. I saw the spread. There was a preemptive spread a couple weeks in advance. It was Ohio State 5.5. And that tells me that there's some respect for Michigan, because I think if you just purely looked at the resumes this year, that number should probably be a little bit higher. I think it should be closer to 8.5, 9, maybe 10. But the fact that it's 5.5 reflects A, that it's in Ann Arbor, and B, that they've won 4 in a row. So 5.5, you can do it. There's no reason you can't. They did it when it was 20 plus last year. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than maybe people think based on the way the two teams have played so far this season.
If I recall correctly, I believe that opening line was 7.5 in 2021. I think, who do you think going into Ohio State were you more confident in, the 21 team or the 25 team?
Oh, the 21 team, because
they had some close calls, but I agree.
Yeah, but you had an upperclassman as a quarterback. You had and we knew what we had in Hutch on defense.
Yeah.
And you look at that team. There were better components, or at least more proven components, than you have in the 25 team.
It's interesting. I'm curious, Michael, what do you think? Would you be more confident in this current Michigan team, or because 22 and 23 for Michigan, those were wagons. Those were teams that you just knew were really, really good. Obviously, last year, a lot of theories as to why that went the way that it did. But I think the 21 versus 25 comp is probably the closest to this. But I also think Ohio State 25 is probably better than Ohio State 21.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that 25 Ohio State is better than 21. I also agree with John and lean toward 21 because of the presence of potential game wreckers on that 21 team that Michigan had. So whether it's Hutchinson or Ojabo, those two guys could be kept silent for 3 quarters, but then in the fourth quarter, if they get one strip sack, if they get one forced fumble on a running back, if they get one TFL on 3rd and short, like they had the ability to change the game. And then I would also put Hassan Haskins in that same category on offense. I maintain that while there certainly have been better college running backs than Hassan Haskins in the last handful of years, I'm not sure I've seen a guy run harder in must-have situations than Hassan Haskins did, whether it was 3rd and short, 4th and short, or goal line. I just thought he was unbelievable in his will and determination. And I think when you have 3 or 4 or 5 of those guys that are just, they can make a play that is different than the other plays that guys can make, I think that's a huge advantage. And when I look at this year's Michigan defense, I'm not quite sure where that play comes from. And when I look at Michigan's offense, I think Justice Haynes was probably the guy that was providing that when he was healthy. But if he's not able to go in that game, I'm just not quite sure who gives you the big breakaway, out of nowhere 70-yard run that changes things the way, Donovan Edwards certainly did it in certain moments too. So that's why I would lean toward being more confident in 21 than I would be in 25.
I want to ask you about Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, and it's a weird situation. Obviously, it's not weird that they're 10-1, and they position themselves to play in the SEC championship game. I think they're almost a near shoe-in to be in the college football playoffs, but he's being courted by LSU, by Florida, and they're not going to wait till mid-January. What happens with Lane Kiffin, and is it a better spot at LSU or Florida, or should he just simply stay where he's at Ole Miss and what he's built there?
Well, that's kind of what I've been most fascinated in, is not necessarily does he end up at LSU or Florida. Like, whatever he chooses is whatever he chooses if he wants to go. I think it's more about, do you leave a place where you are probably now capable of winning a national title in this NIL era to go somewhere else that both those places probably have better historical pedigrees and might have better proximity to local talent. So I'll give you that. But I mean, who can argue with what Ole Miss has done in the NIL era? I mean, they adopted it early. They adopted it aggressively. They adopted it to the point where some schools thought they were probably bending the rules, but they've gotten enough players to where they've put together really, really good teams for a few seasons now. It's not a place where you're expected to win the national title every single season. So the pressure is not as much as it would be for basically what Brian Kelly has endured at LSU before he was let go. And I also think it's a place where, look, they've given him everything he wants. They've made him an extremely high paid coach at, more than $9 million a year. If he wants, they'll pay him more because he can sign an extension right now and get paid more. So to me, it's like, do you mess with good because you want to go and chase something better? And maybe you do. Maybe you do mess with good and go chase something at LSU or Florida because, the historical value of those schools, maybe it means something to Lane or his family. But man, it's hard to see how he can't be happy in Oxford right now with everything they're giving him, everything that's afforded to him, all the options that he has at his disposal, and the non-annual pressure to win every single game, every single weekend, like that's a pretty good spot to be in. So if I was him, I would stay. But I mean, the reports yesterday about his family flying to different cities and looking at things in Gainesville and looking at things in Baton Rouge, I don't know. It certainly seems like he's at least open to it. And then, Jon, your first question I think is fascinating, which is, well, what do you do if you're Ole Miss? Like, this guy was not single-handedly, but played a huge role in getting you to where you are now, making the college football playoff. He's obviously a very good offensive mind, even though he's not calling plays directly anymore. If this is if this is Ole Miss's best chance to win a national title since like the 60s, like, do you let him coach because he's the best guy to get you there? Or do you say, you're either with us or you're not, and if you're leaving, we don't want you, but maybe that costs us a run at the national title? It's fascinating. I don't know the answer.
Is Steve Fisher available?
Yeah.
And I think that's the point that can be missed in this. When you hire a coach as a Florida, LSU, Penn State, et cetera, yeah, you're thinking about 10 years. But I think there's such an important equation to, same thing as I never thought Curt Cignetti was going to leave Indiana this year. Do I think Curt Cignetti is going to be the Indiana coach for the next 20 years? No, I probably don't. And I don't think Lane Kiffin's going to be the head coach. I don't think Lane Kiffin will be the head coach anywhere for 20 years. But if he goes 6-6 next year, he'll still be a hot commodity. Ole Miss hasn't won an SEC championship since 1963. And there's a real chance they could get to Atlanta and get a bye and have a real chance to get to and maybe win a national championship. And if you leave, you have virtually no chance to win a national championship next year because you're going to be building through the portal and all that. Now that's not how Lane works. I understand for sure.
Yeah.
But Ole Miss could give him that. I think Ole Miss would give just as much money as anybody else. Do you disagree?
I know, I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if you try and dive into the mind of Lane Kiffin,
well, sure. Yeah, I'm already a little bit woozy.
Deep, dark place.
Jon, how would you handicap those three jobs? I'm just curious. Ole Miss, LSU, Florida, with what you know about college football.
I wouldn't want anything to do with LSU. I think you're on a very short leash, especially with the way that they have and are continuing to treat their former head coach. Florida,
you'd have a direct line to the governor's office,
right? Yeah. He's got a direct line to you. That's the problem. And I don't know that Florida is that enticing anymore. I think if I'm Lane Kiffin, I stay at Ole Miss for all the reasons that you talked about. They would be willing to pay him whatever those other two schools are, and they've already got the NIL program up and running. That train is running downhill. I would stay at Ole Miss, and this might be all a ploy just for him to get more money out of his current school.
Yeah.
I agree. I would stay too.
So Lane Kiffin is the prize in all of this. Give us a name or two who you think may not have the type of buzz that a Lane Kiffin would have, but for somebody's going to hire a head coach who doesn't have a resume that will enthuse a fan base the way that I think a lot of fan bases want to win the press release in the hiring process. So is there a name or two you think, kind of like a Dan Lanning, right? Like Lanning, we all knew he was a great defensive mind and had helped build something special, but I don't think any of us expected this quickly as the head coach of Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I keep coming back to, and I don't know if he would leave, again, because of the timing and again, because of his relationship with his head coach, which you'll understand when I say his name right now, is Bryant Haynes at Indiana. That's one that I think he's an unbelievable coordinator. And I think that what he's done at multiple stops now, one of the reasons people really like Cignetti is because he's built and he's done it at different places. And when you can restart and rebuild at more than one location, it generally shows that the program, the way you run it, is successful and functional. And Bryant Haynes has been there every step of the way. And the fact that he is a defensive guy while Cignetti is an offensive guy tells you that that defense is entirely Bryant Haynes, or almost entirely Bryant Haynes, in terms of the way he has built it, the way he's recruiting it, the way he's teaching it. The thing about Indiana's defense is they're going to put more guys in the NFL this year than they have in any recent draft, maybe ever. But this isn't a defense that looks the same physically and will test the same at the combine in Indianapolis as a defense from an SEC school or from Michigan or from Ohio State or from Penn State. To me, it's how smart they are, how precise they are, how well drilled they are. There's no mistakes. There's no penalties. There's no silliness. Everybody is punching the football when they try and make a tackle, but it's not costing you tackles. It's just so good. And so that's a guy that I would go after. And I would say if there's a Dan Lanning out there, it's Bryant Haynes.
Well, and Dakota Kid with an interesting, contrast with that. Will Stein, the offensive coordinator at Oregon, similar concept with Dan Lanning's defensive background. Maybe that is the way. There have been a lot more. You're not seeing the Curt Cignettis a ton where you are a head coach at a, D2 and then FCS and then low-level FBS, and then you go get the big job at a Power 4. It's fascinating. But inevitably, there will be fan bases who will sit there and go, wait, we're all excited about the firing part, but we didn't really like the hiring part.
Well, so to go along with that, on the opposite side of that scale, there are a number of programs like our friends right down the road, Michigan State, where if they lose their final 2 games, they're not going to have won a Big Ten game, which hasn't happened there since, I think, 1958. They're not excited about Jonathan Smith. There are other programs that are not happy with the direction, especially with the Curt Cignetti effect, year 2 or even year 3, if they're able to get there. Do you jump into the coaching search market knowing that there are these monster programs out there that are going to get the best bite of the apple? Do you wait a year to make a change and your program continues to flounder for another year in an era where that's going to cost you a lot of time?
Yeah, that's the really hard question, I think, is because so many premium jobs opened early in this cycle. It's like, and then so many guys signed extensions, whether it was Cignetti or Rule or, all the different ones that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. It's like, what do you do? Do you go out there knowing that you're going to probably have to pick from the dregs a little bit? Or do you hang on for another year knowing that recruiting is probably going to take another hit, that, it's going to be another season where ticket sales are down, which is revenue, which is, donor interest, which is donor, all these different things. It's really, really hard. And I almost wonder if in this new era where things can be turned around quite quickly, and with the caveat, however, that Curt Cignetti sets an impossible bar that I don't know if anyone will be able to reach, but does it make more sense to just cut bait sooner in this world and hope that, maybe you have to change coaches every 2-3 years instead of every 5 to 7 years, but maybe one of those quicker changes, you catch lightning in a bottle and that guy gets you to 10 wins and all of a sudden you're back because you hit on it. So I would be more in the camp of more turnover than less turnover, because I think the right guy can turn it faster than the wrong guy trying to swim uphill when it's already started to go the wrong direction.
I mean, we're seeing it with Michigan's opponent this week, Mike Locksley. This is his 7th season.
Yeah.
Now, one aspect I do think that's intriguing with him is that he recruits well. And he's obviously got a true freshman quarterback that Michigan will have. It's a unique challenge that Michigan's defense has. But it's year 7.
Yeah.
And the vote of confidence had to go out, and they'll try it again. It's interesting. Michael, before I let you go, we're going to do some producing on the fly here. Did you get approval for me to ask the last question I was going to ask?
Yes.
Okay.
We can talk about
then
it.
I want you to tell our viewers and listeners what you got coming out next week before the game.
Yeah, so every year at Fox we try and have like a really big feature story going into the game between Michigan and Ohio State. It's obviously a huge deal for college football and a huge deal for Fox. This year I've been working pretty hard on a Bryce Underwood feature. Made a couple trips to Ann Arbor. Got a couple meals with Brian while I was there, which is always a treat. And it's a really cool kind of in-depth look at sort of how Bryce ended up at Michigan, what infrastructure was needed for Michigan to land Bryce, how they're now building around him, and sort of what his commitment and growth within the program means for Michigan's trajectory in the post-Jim Harbaugh era. So that will come out, I believe the plan is Tuesday morning. So hopefully you guys can read it, all you listeners out there, before you hop in your cars and on your planes for Thanksgiving travel. Read it before you fall asleep from the Thanksgiving turkey on Thursday, and then maybe read it again before kickoff if you want a second bite of the apple.
Back so John does his locker room speech on our podcast feed, and he used to say, "Listen to it before work, listen to it on your way home from work, listen to it later at night."
Yeah.
You can get Michael's X Twitter account there on the bottom. We can tell you how great, real quick, and then I'll let you finish. Real quick, I can tell you, and John can tell you how great of a writer is. My father-in-law is a short story writer, and he says Michael's an elite writer. So listen to Ray. He's that good. Go ahead.
So I've got two questions. One is a serious question. I don't know if there's one bit or a teaser you could give us, something interesting you learned about the process of Bryce landing in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, so I would say the little teaser that I can give there is, I'm trying to think what the best one would be. I would say that there was involvement of people and relationships that most folks wouldn't expect, that goes beyond like the Ellisons and things like that. That there were interesting little involvements from alumni, from outsiders that helped Bryce get to Michigan, that, you know, the names that you read and the people might surprise the average Michigan fan. So if that is enough of an enticement without giving too much of away, too much of the story away.
Of course, that was John Jansen heavily quoted in the story.
No, not at all. But the other piece of information, it's not a question that I'm taking away, and it's one that I can't get out of my mind, is you came to Ann Arbor and you got multiple meals. I'm here every day, and I got a couple of frosted cookies. I think it was last week.
Hey, I didn't give it to him for free.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
that's
Uncle Fox Sports bought it for him. I didn't buy. No, I wasn't over there having no.
So, so you come to Ann Arbor and I don't get to go along?
Okay, we'll fix that.
Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
We will make that happen.
I'll bring the press box on the
There we go.
Or no, some bacon. You're the bacon.
Yeah,
Now we're talking.
Thank God I don't have to look up bacon.
Just like that. I'm right
Michael
back
Cohen, Brian Bush.
Oh yeah. Obviously. Why do we have Michael as the star? My man, appreciate you coming on as always. Also, by the way, Michael, so close to an NCAA tournament assistant coach, by the way. Central Connecticut State, big upset in the semifinals. Women's soccer lost in the final. Heck of a game, though, man. Double overtime, right?
Yeah, double overtime. It was a fun ride. We came within 6 minutes of the NCAA tournament. So next year we'll be back.
One of the most fascinating guys in sports. Michael Cohen, appreciate you, buddy. We'll see you out here next week. John will be waiting.
Yeah.
And again, follow up Michael on X at Michael_Cohen13. I just wanted to get to one funny exchange here in the comments. Go Blue Brian. Just need Scott Frost to come back coaching so John can be as happy as self. LW, Scott is at UCF. Brian, yep, totally forgot.
yeah, so did everyone else. Yeah, we're probably about 5 or 6 years away from him declaring another national title.
Well, probably not this year, but hey,
no.
You never know.
Yeah.
So for those watching, and we appreciate all those on X, we got about 50 live right now on YouTube, and we've had higher than that. We appreciate everybody coming in. A heads up for next week. With me out in Las Vegas for basketball and the Thanksgiving holiday, we will not have a live stream like this next week. We will have a video that will go up. John and I will put something together and put it out probably around the same time on Tuesday. So you'll still get that. There'll be no guest. It'll just be John and I talking, breaking down the game.
Hardcore Michigan, Ohio State.
I'm just going to say, John, your thoughts.
Yes.
He's going to talk for 50 minutes, 15 of which will be about the offensive lines. And then we'll sign off. But no, in all seriousness, no Conquering Heroes next week, but we will have probably as long as John will get me the keys, I think you will. You'll get them before Thanksgiving. We'll have the preview episode out a little earlier on the audio side. I know John's already probably prepped a little bit for that locker room speech.
Yeah. Still working on Maryland's, but Ohio State's ready to go. I don't have to be focused on this week.
Well, I just hope they listen to our special teams key from this past tailgate show and just
do something.
Yeah, it would be better.
Yeah.
But hey, we said that about the team for a while last year, and then the final two games they surged. Any final thoughts, John Jansen?
No. Hey, it's just a matter of going out there taking care of business. This is a business trip. It's exactly what it should be, and it should be a final tune-up for what is to come next week against Ohio State.
Can't wait. For John, for Michael Cohen, for all those who help make it possible, I'm Brian Bush. We will have more of these streams coming up in December. We'll figure out the off-season content in the off-season. We're locked in. We're in playoff mode, and we'll keep things rolling. But check out MGoBlue Podcast, the audio feed. That'll be your best spot to get all of our stuff, and we will be back with a pre-recorded video coming up Tuesday next week. Appreciate you watching. Go Blue.